About it. I think let's get on to the first panel here. I will invite the panelists to all join audio and video, and we'll get you all up onto the stage here as I do a quick little introduction. So the first panel I mentioned is managing the specific information security risks that business managers face. Business managers and entertainment advisors have unique risks because of the caliber and the quantity of clients that they manage, and also the quantity of data. Some of the risks include access to bank accounts, managing credit card numbers, and storing the highly sensitive personal information of their clients. Losing clients and dollars over a computer breach definitely keeps everyone awake, and more the reputations are coming into existence that affect business managers. So this panel will explore all of that, along with general information security risks, specific risks to business managers, and also talk about what you can do to protect yourself in your business. David Lam is leading this discussion. I mentioned he's a partner in CISO at Miller Kaplan. And thank you, David, for leading this discussion and also for helping us put together all of this wonderful programming today. I will let you introduce our three panelists here. I know that we have two. And Brian, I think that you're here too. So you could just, we'll get you up onto the stage. But David, why don't you get started and we'll get Brian up here for you.
Well, Matthew, thanks for having me and the group. I'm lucky to be joined by three esteemed colleagues. All of us have been in information security for quite a while. I don't want to go one by one, sort of to break up the introductions and give the spotlights out. So Kim Pease and I met about 20 years ago, and Kim and our then partner Stan Stahl were forerunners in servicing small and medium businesses for information security. And so what happened in that space is that everyone was interested in the large enterprise and not what to do in the smaller areas. And so I would joke with Stan and Kim, why aren't you focusing on big business? And it turns out, even today, there's just this dearth of knowledge and expertise around this space. And Kim and I have done a lot of things together, including I was her client. We used to run an 800-person information security event with ISSA, the Information Security Association here in Los Angeles. And so we go way back. And what I really appreciate most about Kim is the ability to articulate these information security risks of smaller organizations. So Kim, first question out to you. What are you seeing as risks in the space for the business manager, for folks who have all of this information gathered from clients, high profile clients? What are you seeing as those risks?
Well, first, thanks for having me today. It's a joy to be on the panel with David and our colleagues. I think one of the biggest risks is that, you can't just narrow it down to one, but I think one of the biggest risks is leadership and executives understanding and embracing the urgency and the true risk to their organizations. Way back when we used to say if something happens or when something happens, now the if is gone. It's just when. The cyber criminals and the cyber gangs and individual folks, the threats are coming at us. I remember 20 years ago when we started Citadel Information Group and driving to a conference and thinking, what's going to be my my icebreaker story. And, I'd think of a situation that I had dealt with in the past, days or weeks. And now today, there's stories every single day of these events. And I think the second thing is if the executives understand the risk and the urgency to their organization, the second thing to focus on is that this is not a technical problem. And you may have the biggest, baddest, best firewall, and you can have the most skilled and experienced IT folks, and they can have all the certs. But if you're just focusing on the technology part, there's a whole big hole over here that most execs, A, aren't focusing on because they still think it's a technical problem, and B, they don't understand the terminology. They don't understand even the next steps to take. So I think with the execs, it's the understanding the urgency, the realities, the risk, and this is not an IT problem.
And I absolutely concur. I think, and we're still waiting for Brian to get on. Oh, here's Brian. I was going to move on to Brian next. I asked Brian to join our panel for a couple of specific reasons. And Brian, you're muted. I don't know if you can see that on your display. We do a lot of vendor reviews. We look at a lot of vendors and the security they have in place. And the answer often comes back, hey, we have security. And then when we take a look, well, they don't. And so when we were doing our recent due diligence for DataFaction, and I'm sure many of you use that tool, frankly, we were really impressed. The amount of thoughtfulness and appropriate commercially reasonable process that went into that product was phenomenal. And I really wanted to get a sense from Brian. You can't talk.
We're working on getting his audio, so why don't we maybe
I'm going to go to
someone
Ed.
over to Edward.
This is
yeah, there you go.
Because Ed is always my favorite to introduce. Ed and I go back about a dozen years, and so we were, as folks who were running the Information System Security Association, we started building these CISO forums, senior leaders, and Ed is, in my opinion, just one of the absolute best information security leaders in the space. Former CISO at First American, just understands the security inside and out. And as someone who understands how to change culture, I really wanted to bring Ed and talk to him. I also really consider Ed a mentor, and he would always take the rest of us CISOs out to lunch and go, well, how do you become a better person to lead information security? So I wanted to ask Ed this question is, what do you think are the basic hygiene, just the basic recommendations in talking to our audience today that folks should be considering as they manage information security? What are just the, if you're not doing this, you're in a world of hurt kind of thing?
First place I would start is the hygiene is going to be different based on the organization's culture, needs, the architecture of what they need. A lot of organizations are moving to being consumers of applications, and a lot of those applications are in the cloud. So the question now is, do we need to be in the business of maintaining operating systems? Are we better off having an architecture where we have a virtual desktop managed by somebody else that gives us the features and functionalities that we need? If we do need the standard, laptop, desktop type of architecture, then the issue is there's some essential controls. And, I've been a long-term advocate of the Australian Signals Directorate. They have their now Essential 8. They've had their Top 35. You've had the Center for Internet Security that talk about those critical controls. But I want to tie this into something that Kimberly said and that we were talking about before. We have organizational cultures and we have individuals that some buy lottery tickets, some regularly gamble in Vegas, and others absolutely do not. They are different. And for some, the issue is this security thing and the risks aren't real until it happens to them. It's a personal, organizational, cultural perception of reality. How many of us have barred windows in our homes? Well, I guess it really depends on what community you live in. And yet others would say that's an essential control in other neighborhoods and other cultural situations. So I would say we've got to look at the personal and organizational psychology and work on the trust. And then once we have that understood, then figure out what is the mission that needs to be accomplished. And then once we get to the essential controls, we really have to look at, do we, heavily put that in the identity and access management because everything's in the cloud? Or do we go back to our old school essentials of patch management, configuration management, vulnerability management, because we're using our own systems, our own laptops, our own desktops, things along those lines? Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I want to go to the very first point that you made. And one of the things that we've been spending a lot of time on in Miller Kaplan are these new Department of Labor guidelines. You talked about, Ed, the idea that do you really have to be managing a traditional old style, infrastructure where everything's on your laptop, and and this is apropos to Brian from City National Bank as well. As the applications push out to the cloud, what we're seeing a lot of, in fact, my first morning discussion today was those providers having appropriate security, commercially reasonable security in place. So let me throw it first to Kim, and then Ed, I'll come back to you.
Sure.
Kim, what are you seeing out there from IT vendors who are servicing organizations like those in our audience today, in terms of having the right controls or even being on the path to taking care of information security, hygiene, and getting to that, commercially reasonable bar?
Well, I think the first thing is their heart's in the right place. They're skilled are skilled in what they do. They've been doing this for a long time. They understand the basics of technology. The challenge is to get beyond the mindset, and I'm purposely not saying the word ego, to get beyond the ego. I'm saying get beyond the mindset that I've been doing this for 30 years. I understand what Fortinet firewall is. I understand A, B, and C, fill in the blank on the technology, right? It's to get the IT folks and the managed service providers, the MSPs, and the IT vendors to consider the possibility that there may be other ways to do things, and consider being much more collaborative with not necessarily your competitors, but other people and other technicians and other technology folks, to open up our minds and our mindsets and get past what we've always done. Because we all know in this industry that the cyber criminals are up in their game. Their tools are getting more sophisticated. Their attacks are getting more sophisticated. Their mindsets are broadening. So, we I think first have to get past the defensiveness of most people. And we always say IT folks, when us information security folks are introduced to the IT folks, they either love us or they hate us. And they love us because they've been trying to get the executives and executive management to, open up their minds and look at some risks. Or they hate us because nobody's ever looked underneath their hood. And we're going to point out, usually during what we call an assessment or an information security review, we're going to point out the weaknesses in the way a device was configured, or we're going to point out the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities in a process that could be improved. So I speak to the business owners and I speak to the IT folks that this is a collaborative discussion. Our former business partner Stan Stahl always loved the tagline, "It takes a village to secure the village," and he actually created a nonprofit to be able to collaborate with everybody on the hierarchy chart, so to speak.
So a couple of things, and I want to sort of build on what Kim said in her opening dialogue about leadership and executives and information security, and the fact this is not an IT problem. And we've got chat, and we'd love to make this as interactive as we can. So for our audience, if you can put in just some comments into the chat to say, are you struggling with getting information security buy-in? Are you struggling with understanding what to do? Do you have specific questions for us on the panel that we could address? Because we can go down our road and entertain ourselves really well. However, we'd really like to answer your questions. And I think Kim brings up some really good points to talk about. And Brian, let me just go back to Ed so I can close the loop on his questions, and then I'll give you the embarrassing introduction in a moment. You're all set now?
Good to go. Should be good to go. Thank you.
Fantastic. So Ed, coming back to you, one of the things that struck me, like in the first couple of meetings when I met you, is you've managed thousands, sometimes at an organization, tens of thousands of vendors. If there were a piece of advice you would give to, small or medium business owner about how do you make sure those vendors are going to take care of your information security, what would it be?
Be purposeful, be intentional, start small. A lot of the important aspects of security is the disciplines of what I call doing the mundane. And that's a leadership and cultural issue, especially with the current attention spans of the social media generation. Don't try to do it all. The issue with folks is often it's not refreshing because of the difference between a refreshing sip of water and waterboarding is not the quality of the water, it's the volume and velocity. So what you want to do is make sure that you're taking it at a pace, prioritize. It's just as important to figure out what you're not going to do as it is what you are going to do. So with every vendor management program that I've done, it's about understanding the population, realize that that population will change. You're never going to have a clean and clear understanding of your population when you're initially ramping up the program. You're going to be constantly pivoting, reprioritizing, rebucketizing, re-strategizing the tiering. But ultimately, if you see it through, you will see progress, much like getting in shape or weight loss. It's not going to be, oh, on Thursday will be a magical moment. No, it's the discipline of the consistency. It's the long obedience in the same direction that's going to provide you that value. And it's okay to go, oh, that critical vendor is no longer a critical vendor. And it's okay to say, I'm not going to address all of my vendors. I'm only going to focus on my critical vendors, but I'm going to continue to refine and improve my process to define those, to identify those, and to plant seeds elsewhere in the organization to sustain it. So the amount of effort that I had to go through to identify my vendors in the first place doesn't have to be repeated moving forward. I make it self-sustaining.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, in my conversation this morning with one of our clients, the question came up, why didn't we do information security sooner? This vendor didn't have much of a program in place. So you don't want to pick your vendors and then realize they can't secure your data, which is a really good transition to introducing Brian. And my relationship and Kim's with City National Bank goes back many years. In fact, one of Brian's predecessors is still on Ed and my CISO forum here in LA. What really made me want to have Brian as a speaker was we were doing our due diligence in transitioning to data faction in the cloud. And, as Kim can tell you, most of the time when we do these due diligence reports, it's just, we don't have that, we're not doing this. And to really see an organization take the security of their clients' data seriously, it really makes our day. We were really excited to see that they've done just so many positive things, that there's continual improvement place. And so I wanted Brian to come on who, has got, I won't bore you with the list of qualifications, but I wanted Brian to come on and really talk from the perspective of both a bank, and I know, Brian, you own risk at the bank, from a bank and to business managers and, for folks in the entertainment and advisory practice, what are you seeing as the biggest issues for business managers? And I'm sure you've heard tons and tons of stories. So what can you share with this group, sort of have them get more of this information security mindset?
Yeah, thank you. I think you've been talking about vetting your third-party providers and really managing that risk, knowing your critical data, where it's at, who has access to it. But ultimately, we will be the custodian of that data and facilitating that through various services. One thing we're seeing a lot is the bad guys, they're not trying to attack directly our systems anymore. They're actually attacking you, the business owners. They're trying to use social engineering to trick you into giving up your keys, your access to our environment, and then leveraging that to gain that access. So that's one thing. Once you've vetted your providers, once you've vetted our solutions, and you can understand all the different application security controls and the various controls we have in place, that'll give you that kind of confidence and assurance that we can protect your data and provide those services securely. It's then the next steps are for you yourselves to understand your own access processes. Who has access within your organization to that data? Who can approve money movement, right? Who can gain access to various components of your data suite? And so I think understanding, again, the critical data, who has access to it, and training and using training and awareness opportunities for your staff, ensuring that they actually know how to recognize a social engineering attempt. We see a lot of what they call spear phishing and phishing attempts directly to your employees. And then we on our end have to also vet requests for, again, money movement or access changes. We have to always make sure we're doing proper callbacks and ensuring that the wrong people aren't getting access to that environment. So I think it's incumbent upon you as the business owners to ensure that you've got those programs in place. Again, awareness and training with your own staff, vetting your vendors, and then controlling access to the systems.
And Brian, I don't know if you realize this or you saw Kim's face when you talked about phishing attacks, but this is a point of extreme passion with Kim. Yeah. So I want to pass the ball over to you, Kim, in terms of, these link click-throughs. And later today, I'm going to do a demonstration of how utterly simple it is to take over someone's machine and do whatever you want to it. In terms of keeping people from clicking on these links or giving up the information, what are you finding is effective in terms of having people become aware of what's going on in the world to get them to do exactly what Brian said? Give up their information, give up their data, complete an action?
I think there's two things to focus on specifically. One is the user themselves. We have to understand why they're clicking. We have to understand what they saw, because we all see different things. We can all look at the same item or the same view or the same challenge or problem. But we all will also see a lot of different things. So we spend time in not only sending out fake phishing emails to test people, because it's just like a muscle. You got to use it all the time. You've got to practice. You've got to make it a focus. And so we work with the users to get them to understand not what they're seeing, but what they interpret what they're seeing. What are you seeing that somebody else might not see? And the second thing, and I think it's almost most important when you're working with your staff and your users and even your vendors, is to make a safe environment for them to be able to question what they're seeing. And what I mean by that is this social compliance that we all have in business, in life, but in business, where we look up to the people that are above us on the totem pole, so to speak, and we look up to the executives, and there's a certain respect and authority there for people that are higher than us up on the totem pole. And so when these users receive an email from instruction that look like they're from the CEO or the CFO or even a client, we've got to have the users feel safe to question the instructions that they're being given in these emails, which is a lot of why what we call BEC, business email compromise, where a cyber criminal takes over an account or spoofs an email or sends out a phishing email to a user that says, do this, whatever it is, some action, transfer money, change the account, change my payroll account. And when it comes from someone that's above them on the totem pole, an executive, a managing partner, an attorney, they're hesitant in most cases to question those instructions. So I think it's twofold. You have to train the users, you have to get inside their head, help them understand why they're clicking, why they're being influenced. And secondly, work with the executives and the management and sending that message strongly to the management that if you don't create a safe environment for people to question your instructions, they're going to do what they think is the best thing. And that's following the instructions in the email or following the instructions over a phone call, and that increases risk to the organization.
A third thing you might add is, as a business owner, if you're going to establish email communications and other chat communications, establishing a multi-factor authentication mechanism so that it makes it even that much more difficult for the attacker to gain access to those accounts. The social engineering may be successful, that employee may click that link, but there's that new barrier to entry, right? That attacker may not be able to overcome. They could still then re-engineer another attack to try to trick them to giving up their MFA token. That's very possible. But as you raise the cost of the attack to the attacker, they'll typically move on to a softer target. So really, that's probably what we really want to empower you to do is become a hardened target so that they get annoyed and they move on to a softer target. It's probably one of the better ways to couch it.
And Brian, to build on that, one of the things we see repeatedly is people are not using these tools that are free and included. I can't tell you how many clients we see who are using Office 365 and just won't use the free multi-factor authentication tool. And they're missing this. And I want to go, Tate Henshaw put out, I think, an excellent question. I want to unpack his question about how do you approach this? And the approach, Tate, is really going to be the same whether you're 6 people or a couple hundred people in terms of 3 defined steps. I want to just unpack one thing with Kim. You have had really good success in working in these small group meetings with phishing, right? To get into people's heads to understand what they're thinking. Can you tell us a little bit about how those have been successful? So, our audience can take away that engendering these conversations is perhaps one of the most important things that they can do.
Well, I think first you have to have trust with them. So when I go into even, Miller Kaplan, our own business, or I go into clients and, we share lots of stories, but, I tell people I've been tricked, right? And I'm supposed to be the expert. It's unpacking, to your point, why I was tricked and sharing these stories about why an owner was tricked, right? I was on a phone call yesterday with one of our clients, and the CEO and president, we sent out a fake phishing email earlier this week, and he clicked. And he said, I have to tell all of my employees that I clicked on it because, we've got to get past the fear and the embarrassment and the negative emotion that if you fail and you click on a link, you're going to be punished. It's embarrassing. You don't want to tell anybody. And that's the opposite of what we want to do. All of our law enforcement colleagues here in Los Angeles, all the FBI, all the Secret Service, all say the faster a business can react to a situation, the less likely of downtime and monetary losses. So I think what we do best is when we sit down with people, again, it's got to be safe. And I build trust with them and say, you know, these guys are good. These cyber criminals are good. That's all they do all day long. And have that open dialogue. And to Ed's point earlier, you know, some people are going to embrace it immediately. Some people, it's going to take a couple conversations. And some people, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take time after time after time failing those clicking, those fake emails. But if a business has the patience and to Ed's point, the intent and discipline, it will dramatically increase what we call the security culture of a firm.
So David, if I may, in piggybacking off, maybe we ask ourselves the wrong question. Maybe it's not the question of how do we prevent people clicking on links? Because if I finish that sentence of how do we prevent people from clicking on links when HR and marketing are constantly sending emails with links because they're outsourcing stuff, what if we look at the problem with the mindset that everyone will always click on every link that's always provided to them? And we know those types in our organization. And some of them are executives. And, you know, the issue is, well, I don't know which may or may not be real. So all of a sudden, when we take a look at that, then, you know, Brian's point of multi-factor authentication, you know, what's the value of the credentials? Are we using a bastion host approach, as there are companies out there that say, hey, all of your browsing is in a sandbox, so at least the clicking on links doesn't introduce malware. And then it's a focus of what is our process? You know, going back to the Secret Service, I don't try to show you every single counterfeit. I try to show you what the real one actually has. What you know, I won't send you an email asking you to immediately send this invoice for payment via email. Guess what? If your company can actually do that and have that mindset, and you get away from how we've always done things via email, and here's the process, and if you focus on the process, maybe there's less for our people to actually learn. So I'm trying to say sometimes the best thinking is both and, not either or. We get our own myopic looks on solutions, and we're satisfied with the 7% or the 11% improvement versus the potential 80% improvement if we start thinking a little bit differently.
And I want to say one more comment, David, is that through these workshops that I've done specifically at Miller Kaplan, that what Ed just said is what we did. One of the employees said, you keep telling us to stop clicking on these links and that you guys are sending us internally. HR is doing it, IT is doing it. So because of that collaborative discussion, we changed the process, and now we created what we call an internal, the hub. And now when HR wants us to fill out stuff, they say, go to the hub, the form's there.
Correct.
It was a brilliant suggestion by one of our employees.
So I want to tie in these multiple points we're making and answer Tate's question, and Brian, your excellent response in the chat. So in our practice at Miller Kaplan, we've identified 3 things that are essential to building an information security practice. Whether you're one person or thousands of people, it doesn't matter. Number 1, you got to put someone in charge. You got to have a senior person in the organization. It's one person. My old boss used to call it a belly button. There's only one belly button assigned, right, who is in charge and owns information security. You can get help. You can get subject matter expertise. Got to be one person in charge. Number 2, you got to have policies and standards. You got to have this process that Brian defined, because otherwise, how do you know what to do? Right? If you don't know what to do, you're not going to get there. And number 3, you got to meet regularly. You got to say, we're going to come together on a monthly basis, and we're going to take our list and we're going to look at that list, and we're going to bring in disparate discussions. Can we get rid of the links? What can we sandbox? Sandboxing meaning, if somebody clicks on a link, it doesn't go outside of that browser window. They can't do any harm, right? Can we put in multi-factor authentication as Brian is beating that, and thank you for beating that drum. Right. I want to talk to you about, those three elements in terms of, as a practitioner and as someone who I'm sure is hearing stories of woe from your clients. What are your thoughts on how do you set up this process so that you can make sure your security is at this commercially reasonable level?
Yeah, that really speaks to the integration of risk management practices in your organization, right? If you aren't coming together, like David's saying, and you're looking at your business processes and you're brainstorming on what are the risks, what bad things could occur, and then let's come up with ideas and controls, like using the hub, right? So all that process is a risk management process. And if you're not doing that, then you're really not managing that specific technology risk and cyber risk. So again, I like the belly button. I've heard one throat to choke, so I think a belly button is a better analogy there.
You heard one what?
One throat to choke. Things go wrong. That's me. And so the belly button is better. But bringing in all of your key stakeholders, talking about the risks that are posed to the organization through the handling of data. Data has a life cycle. So the creation, the use, the sharing, the storage, the transmission, the delete, the destruction, right? Along its life cycle, there are different systems, different people involved, different processes involved. And you really have to start unpacking that deeper and deeper, or having somebody take a look at that and come back to the senior leadership and articulate what those risks are, what the recommendations are for additional controls to help reduce that risk. And ultimately, it's a trade-off of risk reward, right? So if you decide, hey, multi-factor's got too much friction for our employees, we just don't want to do it. Just understand the decision you're making. You can't bury your head in the sand and not address that. Make sure that you're doing it. You're making that decision with eyes wide open on what those risks are.
Powerful. Kim, what are your thoughts on the building of process around managing information security risk?
Well, one thought before I answer that direct question, one thought you touched on, David, early on in our conversation today about Department of Labor guidelines. There is just a number of frameworks out there and guidelines for the attorneys on the line. The California Business and Professionals Code. You've got the model rules of professional conduct, Rule 1 and 1.4 and 1.5, and they're being revised by the American Bar Association to provide guidance on, the words risk and business technology. You have ABA Formal Opinion 482, 483, 477R. There's a lot of frameworks out there. The ASCPA has guidelines. The IRS has frameworks. So there's certainly in our industry, ISO and CIS, and just pick one, and focus on complying with that framework. I think that to Ed's point, start small. Yes, they may be a full framework, but start small. Pick something. Usually people pick technology, and we focus on patching, and we focus on vulnerability management, and then we focus on, firewall configurations, and second factor authentication is obviously at the top of the list. So I think that getting that mindset and the intent, these are all great words to help executives understand. And you'll notice we've been also talking about risk, not necessarily technology, but risk and processes and compliance.
Excellent. Ed, what are your thoughts?
I was just going to add EIEIO. There's so many different regulatory obligations. So I wouldn't say focus on compliance. I would say focus on educating yourself with the frameworks.
With what?
And focus yourself on educating yourself on the frameworks that apply to your business. We've got some things in the chat. What is your business? What are the obligations? Whether or not you're compliant with it is a risk decision. I hate to say it. And we've seen that with finance. We've seen that with legal. We've seen that with all sorts of organizations. But if you educate yourself using those frameworks and then are strategically opportunistic and build momentum to improving your security posture, improving your risk posture, almost as if you're doing a Dave Ramsey-esque debt snowball. Find those quick wins, realize that it's not painful, find some momentum. It's somewhat like some of the getting in shape, and I view security programs and risk programs in most organizations like personally getting in shape. I'm not going to ask you to run a 4-minute mile. I'm not going to ask you what I'm going to ask you to do is put the ho-hos and ding-dongs down, get off the couch, and take a walk. Let's start there. And then if we can see that there's some benefit there, now let's add some hydration. Let's add some water. It's the small cultural disciplines that we're trying to establish that's going to improve your program over the long term. And you're not going to exhaust those around you if you wind up becoming a talking ahead with, I know all the regulations and I can show you my technology 6-pack, and all that's going to do is demotivate others. What we're trying to do is motivate people to understanding the risk, making a calculated decision of where they're at, and they're going to change that over time as they educate themselves, as they're personally impacted, as their friends are impacted. And then what you're seeing is you're going to see progress. And the whole point is not perfection, but progress. Every day, every week, incremental progress.
And to that point, establishing a baseline, knowing where you're at today,
absolutely,
really fundamental to being able to show that progress over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know Ed, every time Ed speaks or is on a panel, I get another Edism, but now I've got two. I've got technology 6-pack, which is phenomenal. And more importantly, Brian, I want to ask you, because you put about the NIST cybersecurity framework, and there's a NIST cybersecurity framework for small business. Mm-hmm. What do you think about Ed's statement to putting down the ho-hos and drumsticks, right?
Yeah.
And taking up, just taking up one of these frameworks and moving forward. What are your thoughts?
It's that awareness that you're actually on the couch eating ho-hos all day, right? And I think that's an important part. When you have that lack of discipline and you become aware that, we don't have an awareness and training program. I've not looked at my business processes yet. I don't use multi-factor authentication. Now that I'm aware of all those things, I can start to risk prioritize. Which one will I do first, right? Will I start drinking water? Will I stop where I start eating vegetables? Which one will you do first that will get you the most bang for your buck? I think all of us have to be mindful. If you have $1 to spend on security, where will it be applied? And so again, knowing fundamentally, having a control maturity assessment accomplished, and you can do that in-house. You don't have to always go pay one of the big four to come in and do that work. But if you can get, again, a reliable baseline established, you can then start to tackle each one of those areas based on the risk it poses to your organization, because it will be slightly different.
And you don't have to do it alone. Find the other side, what we call cyber champions in your organization. Find the other people that want to get off the couch. Find the other people that want to put down the hose, and do it together collaboratively. Because to Ed's point earlier, we all look at security differently, right? So find the ones that want to have the same end goal, or more importantly, the next first step.
And all of those frameworks have self-assessments. I would argue if you're a small business, the wrong place to go, sorry, folks, is the big four. I would go to a company that focuses on the smaller businesses and use them appropriately. Sometimes it's that, the prophet in their own town issue. Sometimes we need somebody from the outside expert syndrome, to revalidate what you've prioritized, and maybe that's all you need. But a lot of these frameworks have self-assessment frameworks. Educate yourself, do that on the weekend. And I would also argue, probably, again, reinforcing, it's not the frameworks, it is the relationships. If you are not proactively scheduling lunches, dinners, after work drinks with the executives and earning the relationship, earning the trust, you're not going to get anywhere. I view myself and have for the past 30 years as a glorified phlebotomist. I take the blood and I say your white blood count, your red blood count, your LDL, your HDL. And I tell them what the potential consequences of that is. And then we map back of what can we change. But if you're taking blood from somebody that wasn't expecting it, didn't ask for it, and are not asking for your opinion, can you imagine how that's going to come across if you come in, this is what we need to do for the business, and you have no relationship established? Wrong approach.
So I see we have a, oh no, that's not a question. It's just an introduction. So I would encourage everyone, when we get into the last quarter hour of our discussion, to throw out your specific questions and concerns. I know a lot of times when we get on these panels, there's a lot of technical jargon, and would love, the questions as we come to the close here. One of the things I want to talk to the panelists about, and I'll put in, my plug for my 1220 session, where the idea is to open your eyes for how unbelievably easy it is to get owned. How easy it is, especially if your systems aren't being taken care of, to have someone take over your system. What I want to throw out, phishing test tools. Okay, we'll come to phishing test tools. What I want to throw out is there's a major problem with patching. The major problem with patching is that people aren't doing it. And even IT firms who say they're doing it aren't doing it properly. And so the question at hand for the group is, what do you suggest to our audience as to how they make sure that that this critical factor, making sure the updates that keep your machines from being easily hackable, are getting put on their systems?
Mute off.
Yeah, it really starts with cyber hygiene, as you're describing, making sure you've got a plan. If you're, most small businesses, they may have a lot of their operations in the cloud, but they're ultimately going to be giving a laptop to their staff, and making sure that is properly hardened, meaning it's been configured to the principle of least functionality. There are certain capabilities on a laptop that just sit open. We call those ports, protocols and services that are open and available that could be exploited. I often, in my talks, hacking is using something for an unintended purpose. So while that capability and that feature may be available, it's not necessary. And that's where having IT personnel who can go through that, there are various checklists on how to harden. You don't want to over harden your devices and close things off, because it could make it less useful to your employees. But having a routine way to deploy patches, check those configuration settings are still appropriately being applied. I think that's really the part on the cyber hygiene area where you want to really focus if you're managing your own infrastructure. If you're outsourcing that, again, to a vendor, you'll want to check with them to make sure they're doing that appropriately. And that, I would say, so cyber hygiene, generally speaking, is probably one of the biggest areas that will help prevent those kinds of easy exploitations, things we call commodity malware. A lot of bad guys can just these days sign up for ransomware as a service and other nefarious services that are available on various dark web, et cetera. And that's what they're looking to exploit. Are there unpatched vulnerabilities that they can easily take advantage of and render, gain access or otherwise exploit that device?
Ed, do you have thoughts on ensuring that IT or your vendors are taking care of your patching?
Yes. Let's start. It depends on scale. We've seen individuals in the chat saying, hey, I'm a 5-person company. Don't go out and buy a tool. Set it for Windows Update. Set every software to auto update. Start there, because you're going to overwhelm the costs associated. Larger companies, they'll focus on the SCCMs, the Taniums, the big fixes, the EIEIOs for mass. That makes sense at that point in time. But then there's other tools that have been absolutely fantastic to cross-reference all of the tools, like Axonius for real-time asset management. Do I have AV? Do I have my vulnerability management agent? Do I have my web access management? So an organization could have CrowdStrike and Zscaler or Netscope. They could have Qualys installed. What would automatically cross-reference all of those? So as you build and scale, your tools and processes will change. And I think that's the key. If you're small, don't always do what the big players are doing. You will exhaust yourself. You will exhaust your management. You will exhaust your budget. Scale to the appropriateness of your organization.
That's a great point. Kim, what are your thoughts?
I want to go back to the way beginning of the question, right? We're talking about patching, and this is the challenge with a lot of what we see MSPs and IT folks out there is we don't stop for the non-technical people, especially on this call. We don't stop and say, do you understand what we're talking about? Do you understand what patching is? Do you understand that, these manufacturers, the operating systems, Adobe Reader, all the programs that you're using, regardless of what device it is, whether it's an iPhone or a laptop, do you understand what patching means? And I was on a phone call yesterday delivering a report, and we love our reports and we are really proud of our reports. But it occurred to us that, let's stop and back up and confirm. Do you understand? And of course they said, well, what does that mean? What is that? What is patching? And so I think that the business folks have to understand and stop the technical folks when they get too geeky. Say, let's stop. Let's back up before we try to provide a solution. Let's understand what the issue is. And the IT folks need to take a breath because we're so excited about all our tools. We have to take a breath and explain and bring them to Ed's point. Make sure they understand the whole conversation from beginning to end and not just go right to the end and say, this is what you need for a tool.
Yeah, and Kim, that's a good point. Something I've really come to appreciate from you is that we want to make sure that the group understands these vulnerabilities in the systems are the number one way someone's going to get into your system. And I can tell you from our experience, we have never gone into a client who isn't run by an information security professional or has had professional advice where they've gotten the patching right. And so this is the reason to delve into that, to make sure there's some validation process. Because if you're not doing that, and we're going to take a deeper look at this afternoon, if you're not doing that, the hacker's going to scan you and has a means in. Now, what I'd like to do is go up as we get to the close here. Is I want to go up to Ed's technology six-pack, and I want to do something one of my UCLA instructors called bringing the future to the present. You've had a hack, right? And we know there are some special things about business managers. You've got a lot of data. You've got a lot of access, right? Multiple accounts, people's credit cards, bank accounts, and they're typically high profile or high net worth. So you've had an attack, and what's going to come out of it invariably is you're going to have to explain what you had done to take care of their data. You're going to have to show the technology six-pack. So the question for the group, and I'll let one of you chime in who feels most, has an answer ready. What are people looking for when they hear, did you take care of my data? What do they want to know from you as a small and medium business that you did the right thing about taking care of their information?
I'll start. I think it's really about, our due diligence and our due care being applied to the systems that we're offering to our clients to say, you're going to be placing trust in us, and as a regulated as a regulated industry in the financial sector, we have certain obligations, but you're able to inspect those, right, to see how well did we frame out or otherwise structure our controls, and we should be able to explain that to you in terms that you understand. So if we're throwing out all these terms you don't understand, and you feel embarrassed and don't want to ask questions or challenge us, that's a bad thing, right? So that should be a red flag for you that there may be something not quite right.
Yeah.
So that's one thing you can do, is to make sure that you truly understand and they're using terminology that resonates with you. That the specifics around what we do and how we apply those controls. Every application is going to be different, and you should have a lot of options, like levers to pull, ways to like, for instance, multiple accounts, so you can maybe not have all of your eggs in one basket within that particular platform, maybe, or ways to again, when it goes back to access and authorization for money movement and those kinds of features, you should be asking, what are my options, right? In a lot of those different spaces, because some of those controls we are going to own and we are going to control and have to be diligent on, and some of those controls will belong to you as the consumer of that particular service. And so your understanding of your obligations and abilities is really important, and we should be able to educate you on those. So certainly ask the right questions. Just ask all the questions that might come to mind. Ask us if there's questions that you haven't asked that you should have asked, right? We should be advising you as well along that journey.
Good. Yeah, excellent. Kim, Ed, what do you think?
I'm going to weave in some of the things that they hopefully have already heard. Security governance is who is responsible. Like Brian, I grew up, who's the throat to choke? Where's the belly button? Who is responsible? Second is data security as a term. Where's the data and what controls were in place? System security is the third bucket, which we've kind of touched upon: patch management, configuration, malware management. Once those essentials are in place, then it's about prioritization of what controls and all the frameworks should we do. And there's products like Blue Lava and others that do those prioritizations. Then as you start maturing, then it's with the patch management point that you made, David, some can't do it all. And then you need to be able to prioritize what vulnerabilities should you start with if you can't do it all. So that's the deep surfaces, and that's the Kennas and the others that are out there. So the issue is the tools are not as important as the process and the maturity. Diagnose the patient, figure out what's needed. Is it surgery or manipulation? Then figure out what tools you need for the organization you're in, and then do so with purpose and diligence. Don't be, half-baked in the approach. Make sure that you leave it better than you found it.
Nice, excellent. Kim, what are your thoughts?
We want to still
Is anyone else having trouble hearing Kim?
Yeah, Kim, we're losing your audio.
Oh, sorry.
It sounds like a bandwidth issue. Now I can't hear you at all.
Kim, you could just try to refresh your screen and rejoin. Maybe that'll work.
All right, Kim looks like she's rejoining. So let me, Ed, Brian, what are we missing in the business management framework? Or what are we missing in this discussion? We've got about 6-7 minutes to wrap here. Do either of you have any thoughts on what do you want to say to our group in terms of things to think about, or what's top of your list, or what keeps you up at night as a security professional that, our business managers and entertainment advisory people should think about?
Yeah, I kind of put in the chat a little bit about having good backups and recovery plans. It's inevitable that a bad thing will eventually happen to somebody, right, or some organization. And so having at least a written plan of how you will respond to that type of situation, whether it be a ransomware event or a data loss, a data leakage, maybe event of an insider employee or somebody who got phished. That way, in the chaos or in the frenzy to respond, you don't have to make it up as you go, right? And you've had time beforehand to think about your response criteria, what you'll do, notifying law enforcement. Hopefully you've explored cyber insurance and you have points of contact for that. You can also get no fee incident response retainers, meaning a company who you can call in the moment and they will provide you the services you need without needing to do a statement of work and have to go through the contracts and all that stuff. So having pre-arranged incident response providers, all of that being in your incident response plan, I think that's an important thing to do. We've been talking about more of the proactive prevention. Prevention's worth a pound of cure, but you're going to have to cure it at some point, right? So if you've identified and you're protecting the information, you need to be able to detect and respond to incidents that you do have. So that's another area I think that is often overlooked is just spending the time to not only do the risk assessments, identifying the risks and controls, but also if it happens, how will you respond?
Kimberly?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
All right. I can't hear David now.
Sorry, I muted because I heard a pinging back. So,
Okay.
Kim, coming back to you, what are your thoughts?
So to answer the last question, we all want a silver bullet, right? What's the best firewall? What's the best this? What's the best that? And I think one of the challenges is we've got to step back and identify the needs and requirements. I remember years ago when cell phones were just kind of coming into the business with owners, and one of the owners came up and said, I need a cell phone because I'm going away for the weekend, right? And I still want to be connected to my business. And the IT guy said, okay, and turned around and walked away. And I said, whoa. You don't know where he's traveling. You don't know how long you want the battery to be. You don't know, how big the physical phone has to be, what he's going to charge, whether he's going to do cell, whether he's going to do what. And I think that taking the time with the business people, they know what they want. We got to pull more out of them and spend the time. And that's tough to get executives time and business management time and attorneys time. But to understand really, truly what they want, how they're going to use the technology, be it second factor firewalls, VPNs, doesn't matter. And again, come to that understanding of what's the right solution. Because Ed said early on, one tool that works for this company is not necessarily going to be working for this person or this company.
Yeah, and
right.
if I can, at the very end, the issue here for me is, again, relationship. If we can put ourselves in the mindset for the business folks that are on the call now, we recognize that you're the pilot. On the flip side, for the information security and IT people on this call, you're the ground crew that actually makes the plane flyable. It's both and, not either or. So pilots, recognize that you need to appreciate the ground crew. They're enabling you to do the business. Ground crew, you're not the most important thing. You have a very important task, but the business is what we're talking about, not security, not compliance, not standards, not any of the other things that we focus on. They're necessary to keep that plane in flyable, ready shape, but then we hand it over to the pilot, and the pilot ultimately decides how he's going to fly. It is a partnership, and until we work on the partnership, we're just going to be speaking to the popcorn ceilings and getting ourselves messy. We need to really work on the relationship aspect between the two groups.
And I think, Ed, that partnership message is a really great ending point for this fantastic panel. I want to thank you, Ed, Kim, and Brian for giving your time and participating and insights to the group. I want to throw out that talk to your peers about who's giving them their information security advice. I am thrilled to be of assistance if you want to reach out and have questions of just the direction, because this is a space just like you go to your lawyer or your accountant where you need the right expertise to help guide you down this path, to understand the navigation and where to go to set up these systems. And as I think Ed, Kim, and Brian have done an excellent job at, it's not all at once. It's pick a plan, make the plan, stop eating your ho-hos, and start working on your six-pack. Thank you, Ed, for another great saying. And thank you all for your attention to the panel. I'm going to turn it back to Matthew, and I will see hopefully all of you later today.